"Get your dirty hands off my servers, you little criminal." That's how it started in a cavern of humming machines at 2:47 a.m. with a man who owned half the city shouting at me like I'd just confessed to blowing up the place. Yeah, that happened. But hear me out before you judge, because what you saw on the news was the easiest, loudest part of a much quieter truth. My name is Jamal. I was 16, clutching my laptop in a server room because that's where my mom worked nights cleaning carts, empty hallways, fluorescent lights. She's Maria. She worked herself to the bone so we could eat. I tagged along so I wouldn't be alone while she worked double shifts. You think being in a place at the wrong time is a crime? Me too, until a billionaire decided it was. Richard Blackstone stood over me that night like a statue, come to life. Polished suit, platinum phone. A face that only ever met real problems on a boardroom agenda. He called me a thief. He said I'd been stealing data, sabotaging systems, maybe even working for foreign governments. Cameras came out phones, flashed, people gathered like it was a spectacle. My mother's cleaning cart sat forgotten while the whole building watched. My hands were up. I tried to explain. "Sir, I can explain what I was doing." Nobody wanted to hear it then. The moment he had a single USB drive in his hand, the narrative was set guilty. But stories don't start and end with loud accusations. This one goes back to a tiny apartment in Oakland where my dad, David Santos, taught me to listen to broken machines. He was a Navy electronics tech, the kind of man who could hear a hard drive whisper and tell you what it meant. He didn't come back from his last deployment. A roadside bomb took him. My mom worked nights. I learned everything I could in the gaps online, courses, library, computers, fixing neighbors' phones for spare cash. "Listen, first, judge never," my dad used to say. That's how I learned to see a problem not who caused it, but where it's coming from. When I started coming to the office with my mom, I kept my head down and did homework in the break room. But after a while, I noticed things that didn't add up. Blackstone loved telling people his systems were unhackable. Yet, late at night between mop buckets and empty cupboards, I ran a few scans on the public Wi-Fi and found 17 glaring vulnerabilities, holes a college team would have been embarrassed by. Old patches, weak passwords, misconfigured firewalls. The unhackable fortress was more like a house with the front door wide open. I had two choices. I could tell someone and get laughed out of the room because a poor kid from the wrong side of town telling a billionaire his empire had holes. Well, you know how that sounds. Or I could quietly fix what was broken. My dad taught me to fix, not to flaunt. So, during my mom's shifts, I closed the back doors, applied updates, tightened configurations, small surgical repairs that made performance better without leaving fingerprints. I didn't want praise. I just wanted the systems to be safe. That was it. 3 weeks later, Blackstone found me behind a rack and decided I was the enemy. He screamed words that belonged in an old, ugly playbook, insinuations about who I was, where I came from, and what I must be capable of. Security searched me, dragged out my toolkit, my school notes, a USB with homework, and the story went viral. Teenage hacker caught red-handed. For an hour, the world believed that headline. But here's the twist, and stay with me because this is the part that changes everything. The systems that someone accused me of sabotaging were actually running better than they'd been in years. Network stability, response times, operational scores. Everything improved after I started tinkering. Someone had been in Blackstone systems for months before I ever touched them. They were not cleaning things up, they were stealing. That's when Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a former NSA mind with MIT, stamps on everything she'd ever written, walked in and asked a question no one else had: who benefits from improved performance? She ran diagnostics, and with the patience that comes from decades of looking at code and chaos, said what I couldn't say while Blackstone shouted, "These systems have been fixed, not damaged." Then she did something the cameras loved. She gave me 10 minutes a planted laptop with obvious flaws and asked me to show what I knew. No internet, no tricks, every camera watching. That moment was loud and terrifying, and also the moment everything quietly shifted. I found the vulnerabilities like a mechanic finds a worn, bearing SQL injection here unpatched. Buffer, overflow there, poor firewall rules that let data sneak out in tidy little packages. I didn't just point. I wrote patches, explained attack vectors, sketched diagrams on the fly. Then I opened a server, listened to the fans like my dad taught me, and fixed a hardware issue that had stumped their best techs for weeks. You could see the change in the room on the faces and the slowing of camera shutters as the narrative unraveled. Dr. Rodriguez ran her scans in real time, and her face went white. The forensic trail didn't match the guilty story. It matched something else. Someone, an Eastern European syndicate called Midnight Wolf, had been siphoning data for 8 months, exfiltrating millions of dollars worth of sensitive files. They'd lost access 3 weeks earlier. The timeline. It matched the night I started patching holes. Every path I described was a path they had used. Every closure I made was a door they couldn't use anymore. I hadn't been stealing. I had been the person who stopped them. The lobby went quiet. The cameras turned. Blackstone's chest puffed and then collapsed as evidence replaced assumption. The billionaire who'd humiliated me and my mother had almost prosecuted the very person who had saved his company. An FBI agent picked up the call Dr. Rodriguez made. Within hours, the federal probe that might have swallowed us all changed focus. Midnight Wolf, not Jamal Santos, was the real target. This is the point where people's reactions split. Some were quick to apologize. Others were too proud to admit they were wrong. Blackstone announced scholarship funds and internships gestures that looked good on camera while stock prices tumbled and lawyers circled like sharks. Social media flipped from condemnation to celebration almost overnight. Listen, first Judge Never trended as if the whole world suddenly remembered it mattered. 6 months later, things looked different. I got a scholarship, an internship, and an entrance into opportunities my mom and I had only watched from afar. Dr. Rodriguez offered me work and mentorship. My mom, who had begged to keep her job only hours earlier, could finally stop working double shifts. The cleaning cart was gone, replaced with school applications and research papers. Midnight Wolf was tracked further thanks in part to the traces I could show the FBI. Blackstone lost prestige clients and the kind of influence that doesn't come back quickly. He apologized on TV and later did diversity training, a version of accountability imperfect but real. But let me be clear. The victory wasn't just mine. It was a lesson about assumptions about how quick we are to assign guilt to the ones with the loudest accents or the smallest wallets. Talent doesn't come with an address or a last name. It comes from someone who listens, tinkers, and refuses to be invisible. Now, here's the part where this story opens the floor to you. If it were you in my place, sitting in a sterile lobby while the world watched and decided, would you fix the problem quietly or stand up and tell the world what you did? Would you risk being branded a criminal to protect something bigger you decide? You know what I mean. If this story moved you or pissed you off, say so. Tell us how you'd react or share a time when someone you know was written off and turned out to be brilliant. Hit a subscribe if you want more stories that push past the headlines and into what really happened. And if you've got a memory where prejudice nearly cost you or someone you love, tell it in the comments. Let's make a space where listening wins.